Hey everybody, P. Turner, executive producer and host of your Break It Down show. With today's introduction, I'm going to keep it as fast as I can. You hear me talking quick because I want to get you on to hearing Victor Davis Hanson once again back on the show. And I'll challenge you this. What other podcast do you see Victor Davis Hanson on regularly? So look, he's got a great new book coming out. We're going to talk about that next time. This time I had Evan Sayet on the show, and that show will post about a week or two. And Evan said, hey, I heard that you know Victor Davis Hanson. I'd love to have him on the show with you. And I thought, well, shoot, here's an opportunity to have two really smart guys on the show. By the way, Evan's episode is always co-hosted by Eric Kleinsmith, who is my co-host and also my former commander in Bosnia. Why do Eric and Evan go together? Well, Evan did a really powerful piece examining left ideology and ultimately wrote a book called The Woke Ideology. And Eric recognized the quality of the analysis done. It doesn't matter political lean, like can you break down complex issues, data, and turn it into some kind of analysis that makes sense? And he did. He does that. And so Evan and Eric had become friends. And Evan is a brilliant mind in terms of looking at the history of these things and how they've progressed and where they're likely going. And these are things that we all want to know. Whether or not you agree politically, powerful brain. Well, and also, obviously, Victor Davis Hanson falls into that category. His breakdown of histories and looking at things and applying that knowledge to today, and his access to very high-end minds thinking and talking along with him, whether they're investors or academics. You know, he gets to take a really powerful survey and a lens that I value in terms of like, what do you think's coming? How does this work? How does this not work? What are we missing? And Victor does a great job of that. I'm mostly going to shut up this episode. So you're not going to hear a lot more from me once I conclude this intro. Evan does his job. He comes in and asks the questions that he wants to ask. And it's funny, on the YouTube side, from the live, this is one of the shows that was live once before. And so if you go to the live channel, you'll see a lot of notes on Evan talking too much. And the host is this, and the host, people didn't realize I'm the host. That's how hidden I am. They don't even mention me in the whole thing. Evan does a great job. He asks questions, these guys get going, and you get to hear some pretty unvarnished truths about how the right sees the left. And I think we can all take that because, I'm going to go out and find someone from the left talking about the right. And we do this because we want to create the ability to see one another, to hear excellent talk, not hyperbole. And so I think we accomplish that here. Anyhow, one of the best ways to support the show is when you buy these books. If you buy Evan's book about woke ideology, if you buy Victor Davis Hanson's latest book about World War II, send me a picture. Let me know, because I can then send that to these guys and say, hey, look, just wanted to let you know, people are buying books. That is how we get these great guests, because we know we sell books. So don't keep it a secret from me. Let me know about it. In general, let me know. Talk to me. Pete@breakitdownshow.com. Email me. I'll hit you back. That's not a problem. All right. I'm going to shut up. And really, you're not going to hear much more from me from the next half hour or so. Here it comes. Victor Davis Hanson and Evan Sayet.
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Proops.
This is Jordan Harbinger.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This is
East.
Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick Marotta.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
Hey, this is Skunk Baxter.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
This is Victor Davis Hanson with the Break It Down show.
And Evan, would you do one for us too?
Sure. This is Victor Davis Hanson. And no, you didn't mean that. This is Evan Sayet with the Break It Down show.
Down show.
Dr. Will Riley, and you're watching the Break It Down show. Pete Turner.
Hey, so you guys have been on a number of speaking events together, and I thought it'd be fun to have you come on just to kind of exchange notes. And Evan, you had a question to open, so I'm mostly going to get out of the way and let the two of you talk.
Well, first of all, it's always a pleasure to be on with you, Pete, but it's always an honor to spend time with you, Victor. You're one of my heroes. I tell you that every time. You had a piece just the other day that I thought, even more than all the others, just laid out exactly what the other side is offering. And that is the removal of everything that has been an institution in America and even in Western civilization. You listed them one after the other, whether it was the filibuster, whether it was the 9-person Supreme Court. I think if this were my show, the question I would ask of you is what do these people want and what are they willing to do to get it?
Well, what they want is an equalitative result, large state enforcement to make us all equal as they see equality, with themselves exempted, of course. And they can't achieve that goal. They have never achieved it, whether it was Eugene Debs or Norman Thomas or the 60s, within the parameters of the Constitution. What's new about this 2020 election, this is the first election in my life in which the left is so empowered after the Obama years and the tumult of the 2020 year, plague and lockdown and recession and riot, that they're actually openly and candidly saying that we're going, as you said, change the structure of the country. And that means 52 states, not 50 after 62 years. After 150 years, no longer 9 courts, justices on the Supreme Court. After 190 years, no longer a Senate filibuster. And after 233 years, no longer an electoral college. And that's the beginning. And so they're very candid about that, and they're emboldened. And we'll see what happens. But they think that they can change the system along with open borders, changing demographics, and finally get their sort of socialist, totalitarian state that's going to make us all happy and utopian. But I'm kind of scared.
I'm sorry. My take on it, Pete and Victor, is that this is the culmination of the 60s radical revolution that failed. When it failed because they couldn't get anybody to join them in their revolution, because these were grown-ups who actually recognized that there is good and evil, right and wrong, better and worse. They'd lived through Roosevelt's depression. They'd lived through the horrors of polio. They'd lived through either by escaping Stalin and Hitler or going over and fighting Hitler. They'd seen the socialist system that was being offered by these radicals, and they couldn't get anybody to join them. And so they went on what we know as the long march through the institutions. They took over the schools and turned them into their ministries of indoctrination. They took over the media, news and entertainment, and turned it into their ministries of propaganda. Now they have the ministry of social communications. And it was Mark Rudd. And you have to remember, these were really evil, I would even say sick people who started that revolution in the 60s. I mean, when William Ayers and his terror group, the Weather Underground, met for the very first time in Flint, Michigan in 1969, they took time out to cheer Charles Manson. These were the people who did these horrible things. They kidnapped, they killed, they loved to kill cops. And when they failed, they decided that they would take over the institutions and create social justice warriors by basically brainwashing them. And Mark Rudd said the true flowering of the 60s will come in the 90s when we've taken over the institutions. Well, he was wrong only because he missed the obvious. Once they take over the institutions, they would need another 30 years to then indoctrinate subsequent generations. Well, if from the 60s to the 90s is 30 years, guys, what's 30 years from the 90s? 2020. And this is why, for the first time, you're seeing them take off their masks. You're seeing them show their fangs, and they're using exactly the same language that they did. They now call themselves socialists again. They now are calling for the murder of cops again. It's the same language. It's the same motive. They just have their social justice warriors. Now they've got the numbers. And that's what's particularly frightening to me.
Well, I don't know if they have the numbers, but they sure have the institutional financial support, because they control even the boardrooms of the corporations. They control, as you said, Hollywood. So they form images and messaging. They own entertainment. They own the NBA. They own the NFL. They own the Major League Baseball. They own the foundations. So they have all of the cultural, financial, economic, and social levers that move this society. And they're all coming together now, along with the media. So it's a holistic French Revolutionary Jacobin effort. It's not, we're going to get rid of the British, and it's going to be a narrow political revolution to ensure personal freedom, liberty, private property, and autonomy. It's much more, let's go kill the priests in the French Revolution. Let's go kill the aristocrats. This is a civil war. So it's more like the French Revolution than anything in our own history. And I think they would say that. They don't like the American Revolution. They brought
a guillotine. They brought a guillotine as a prop.
They did. They have a new magazine in 2011 called Jacobin, and they changed the date of America from 1776 to 1619, as if it doesn't matter when we had the Declaration of Independence. So these are very formidable people, and my only regret is there's people on the conservative, traditionalist, normative side that don't understand it and they feel that this is, another Bill Clinton or Al Gore, but it's not. This is
or that the pendulum will swing back, because it always does and it always has, but it hasn't always.
no.
That's just been our experience because of our Constitution and because of our culture that they seek to destroy.
Yeah.
Now, probably the most frightening thing that you mentioned along the way that they control for me is the boardroom, because they have always been the thing that has always kept them from being so political is that they're profit driven. And once they decided that the profit was found in promoting the lie, and the first time I remember this is with Nike and making Colin Kaepernick into this hero who lost his job because he took a knee, which is absolutely the opposite of the truth. He took a knee because he'd already lost his job. He'd never spoken a word about social justice, nor did he care about social justice. And yet they're putting out this absolutely diametrically opposed to the truth narrative for profit. And that scared me. And then I saw Gillette do it. Now we see the NFL doing it.
Yeah, I agree. And they have where I work, Silicon Valley, $4 trillion in market capitalization in 60-mile circumference of Facebook, Apple, Oracle, Google, Yahoo. So they have this enormous amount of money that makes them exempt from their own ideology. In other words, if they want open borders to change the demographic, then they have walls around their homes. If they want,
and the kids go to private schools, and they've got private security guards, and they've always exempted themselves from their own rules, including in the United States Senate, where they're literally exempted from their own rules.
And they remind me of Bolsheviks that all had dachas on the Black Sea coast. So they're a very strange bunch. They're very wealthy. They're very aristocratic. They're snobbish. They hate the middle classes, the snowmobilers and the jet skiers and the Winnebago people. And they romanticize the poor as kind of a medieval exemption peanuts because they don't want to be around them. So they glorify them in the abstract. And, they give their extra clothes to their nanny or their second car to their gardener, and they feel so wonderful about themselves. But they do not want to live with the inner city people or people who are immigrants, and they glorify them as sort of a way of justifying their segregation. They're not very nice people, and they're very dangerous because we have this idea that, they're just delusional leftists, but these are hardcore, angry people. And
by the way, heirs to hardcore angry people who started the revolution back in the 1960s. I mean, if you go through just who William Ayers is, and just because he then morphed into a more managerial position in the revolution, he became a college professor instead of a terrorist setting off bombs and fomenting revolution and being on the lam. He has not changed in the slightest. In fact, there's a famous interview with him that was published in the New York Times where he was asked, "Do you regret setting off bombs?" And he said, "I don't regret setting off bombs. I only wish we'd done more." Well, they're doing more now, only he's outsourced the terror.
And they've really taken advantage of a couple of developments that they were so prominent in promoting. And one was the end of moral hazard by universities, and that is the federal government came in and backed these student loans, and now we have $1.4 trillion in aggregate debt. So we're turning out millions of these ideologically prepped young people they think they're educated and articulate. They're not, but they're very disappointed because working at Starbucks or a nonprofit or whatever it is does not allow them to have the middle class existence that they make fun of, but they secretly desire. They want to get married, have kids, buy a home, buy a car, have no debt, and that's not happening. And
I really found unappealing, to say the least, the way that those who chose not to waste their money on useless degrees, but actually went out to the world and started to work and learned with their hands and learned from experience, they call those the uneducated. Yeah. I don't call those with degrees better educated. I call them long educated. And in fact, I argue, obviously this is not a mathematical formula, but they are actually 8 years stupider than their contemporaries. The 4 years they lose from experience and the 4 years that they lose from being misinformed about reality.
Well, you can really see that when I've written a couple of articles with specific proposals to reform higher education. One of them was the university backed their own loans. they would be very cost efficient if they had to do that. Another was that just as they were requiring SAT scores or ACT for entrance purposes, they should have an exit exam, because I have a suspicion that after 4 or 6 years, the people would test less successfully than they did when they started. Another thing is that globalization, which they promoted, not that it's always bad, but the two coasts, one with a window on the EU and one with the tigers in Asia, it really said anybody whose labor could be Xeroxed abroad or whose profession or product could, that was a wise thing to do. So we hollowed out this entire interior, and then we sort of confused cause and effect. We said, well, these guys are all on meth, or they're losers. I didn't go to the fracking fields. I didn't learn how to code. And I'm almost quoting some of my colleagues specifically in National Review that wrote that. And then the people on the coast were deemed winners, because all of a sudden, if you were in finance or high tech or law or what I'm in, media or whatever it is, then your market went from 330 million to almost 8 billion.
Yeah, remember back when Thomas Wolfe wrote Bonfire of the Vanities, he called them the masters of the universe.
Yeah.
The only problem is they couldn't deal with day-to-day existence, and they their own revolution ate them. The other thing is, though, when they go global, they totally eliminate any human rights. They totally eliminate any of the protections that they supposedly care about. But the workers in America are protected by unions, are protected by law, are protected by constitutional rights. Overseas, that's simply not the truth. So yeah, they're profiting, but they're profiting at the cost of their soul.
You can really see that with the NBA. So we have Steve Kerr, the coach, lecturing us on our pathologies. Then we get LeBron James, Mr. Cool, who tries to act like a nerd with his Malcolm X glasses and his reading on camera. And then he lectures us how sick America is. Meanwhile, their revenues from both viewership and actual attendance in the NBA are just drastically falling. It's the only major sport where the white audience is below 50%. 43% of the audience is white now. They don't, because they lecture everybody about how racist and privileged they are. And so people tune them out. So to make that up, they look at this 1.4 billion person market in China, and they say, you know what? Nike sells more shoes in China than they do here. LeBron's better known. We have these franchises. We're teaching them how to replicate the NBA, and we're not going to say a word about Hong Kong or the Uyghurs or the re-education camps or Tibet or the racism that's endemic in Chinese society. And we're even seeing the same type of schizophrenia with Hollywood, where we just learned that light-skinned actors are preferred in Hollywood because the Chinese insist that they sell better, and they'll open up their markets to films that make the necessary adjustments. So for all the social justice clarion calls, they're very timid people, and they're opportunists and careerists, and they really are capitalists beneath all that socialist rhetoric.
Well, in addition, their first step goal, every revolution's first step goal is the destruction of the world as it is. And so even all the way back in the Vietnam War, you know, when they forced us to pull out, when they lied about the Tet Offensive and all of the rest, they didn't care that as soon as we were gone, the North Vietnamese were going to come in and do what they do and slaughter the people of the South. They didn't care about the people of the South. They didn't care about people with yellow skin. They cared only about an American defeat, weakening Western civilization. Because as the dominant civilization, if you're going to create your revolution, whatever it is you envision as the perfect world, the first thing you have to do is destroy Western civilization. And throughout time, this has led socialists to have some pretty strange bedfellows. You know, you look at Hitler, and I in my book, sorry, I'm going to promote it, called The Woke Supremacy. I proved that Hitler was in fact a socialist. It was a socialist regime, and he wanted a world. His perfect world was a world without Semites, and yet he sided with the Mufti of Jerusalem. Right? Stalin wanted a perfect world without religion, yet he sided with the religious fanatics in the Islamic world. Right? Today, you have the democratic socialists, you have the woke supremacists who want a world without discrimination against women and gays and others, and yet they side with the Islamic fascists, the Islamicists, even though they as a matter of course, oppress women and murder gays. And the reason is for this attraction they have for each other is they very different visions of what the perfect world would be. But all of them need, before that perfect world can be created, for the world as it is to be destroyed.
Yeah, I think when we say they, it's not the understandable people who in the 20s or 30s or the 19th century did not have full civil rights, or they didn't have a 40-hour work week or disability insurance or Social Security. This is not a workers group. Indeed, most people who are blue collar are voting for Trump, regardless of their race, over Biden. But what we're talking about when we say they, it's kind of an older tradition that goes all the way back to the contradictions of the West in Greece and Rome in the medieval and Renaissance period, where our system creates so much wealth under free market capitalism and private property protections, as well as freedom of speech and expression and leisure, that it requires a responsibility of the citizen to say, you know what, I'm pretty affluent and I can say and do what I want, but I have my community, I have my tradition, I have my ancestors, I have my family, I have my religion, and they serve as informal checks on excess. Otherwise, I give in to my appetites. But we have this elite in this country. It's mostly white, very wealthy, upscale, so-called credentialed or high educated, branded people. And they've been very privileged, and they create this whole psychological structure that they project. So if they feel guilty about their segregated lives, and they say a guy on a forklift in Ohio is a segregationist with white privilege, if they feel bad that they have a wall around, Mark Zuckerberg has a wall around all of his estates, and walls down on the border are bad. But it's really in that tradition of people who've done very well in the West, and they have every opportunity to express that wealth and satisfy their appetites. But instead of being grateful or showing gratitude or appreciating the system or just keeping quiet about politics and giving to charities, or there's so much money in Silicon Valley, trillions of dollars, you'd think that they would not have people on El Camino Real sleeping in Winnebagos all day and all night as they go into Google and Apple because they can't afford even to get an apartment. But they're not interested in the felony right in front of them. They always want to worry about the misdemeanor somewhere else because it's easy to address. It reminds me of, I think it was Bleak House, Miss Jelbley had this, she was a character in Dickens where she was always crusading about the sins of Victorian England and Africa and Asia. And then everybody noticed that her children were poorly dressed, they were poorly educated, they weren't well fed. And that's sort of what the left does. When it sees a felony, it says, oh my God, the inner city, 7,000 people getting killed a year on murder. Oh my God, declining scores among minority youth. Oh my God, I can't deal with this. So I better start giving a lecture about global warming.
They then will conjure the explanations that don't exist, but that they need. For example, in the past, if there was oppression, that included aggression against what I call in my book the others, whoever the others are. There's actual physical aggression against the Jews in Germany, against the bourgeoisie in Stalinism. But because there are no aggressions that are explaining the poverty of one or another group, they make up microaggressions. And they continually add modifiers before the word that's essential that changes the meaning of that word 180 degrees. So microaggressions, actual aggressions are physical, they're intentional, and they prevent one from achieving what they wish to achieve with their day or with their life. Microaggressions are verbal, they're unintentional, and they do no actual harm.
Yeah.
But nonetheless,
systemic, another one, systemic, and not just racism. It has to be systemic racism. That means it's insidious. We don't quite see it, but it's at the very heart of our system. Whether if it was just racism, they would say, okay, you're a racist, or there's racism, so here's example A, B, and C, but they can't, so they say it's systemic.
Right, institutionalized, unconscious. It's everything but obvious and evident and provable. And another one, I mean, the all-encompassing one is taking the word justice and adding the modifier social before the word justice. And it changes justice from being the closest possible wedding of outcome to behavior to anything that advances the cause.
Yeah. No, I agree, and I don't know what to do about it because the conservatives tend to be live and let live, and they think, you know what, I have my family, I've got my friends, I got to help, I've got to keep my job, and they don't pay attention to these cultural institutions, or they'll think they're still in a time warp. Oh, the Ford Foundation, I remember Henry Ford, or the Rockefeller Foundation, good guy, or something like that, and they don't understand. Or Hollywood, I love Gone with the Wind, or I will love Casablanca, but they don't keep up with it, and they don't understand what has happened. And then when they get confronted with it, they sort of have a monastery of the mind. I know so many people, 40, 50, 60, that suddenly they say, I haven't been to a theater literally in 10 years. I don't watch movies, Victor. Oh, by the way, I turned off the NBA 5 years ago, the NFL 3 years ago. I'm thinking about turning off Major League Baseball. Or they'll say, I don't watch sitcoms anymore on TV. I don't want to get the message. So there's a whole group of people, millions of them, that are in hibernation or seclusion, even though they look visibly engaged, but psychologically and mentally, they're in a monastery.
Conversely, we self-ghettoize so as not to cause trouble. We go to our in-laws' house and we don't talk politics, or in the office, because we don't want to get fired. We don't want to get canceled in this cancel culture. And so we stifle ourselves. So even if you were outraged, even if you did go to a movie and you were outraged by its overt and wrongful politics, you used to go around the water cooler and have a conversation about a film you saw yesterday. Today, if you're on our side, you self-ghettoize. And that's particularly frightening to me because segregation has always been just an intermediary step to the more evil end that then followed. The reason that the Democrats on the plantation segregated black children from white children was so that the black children couldn't disprove the narrative that they were selling of blacks as less than human and thus justifying slavery. The reason that Hitler first put the Jews into ghettos before the final solution was so the Jews couldn't disprove the narrative of themselves as vermin with their humanity by being part of the community. And when we agree to be ghettoized by keeping our mouths shut, don't think that this is simply the end. This is a precursor because they are dehumanizing us. I remember when Jimmy Fallon had Donald Trump on his television show, and the next day they went after him. They attempted to cancel him. They were so cruel to him via media and elsewhere that he thought they wanted him to kill himself. What do you want me to do? Kill myself? I'm sorry. And the word they used for what he had done wrong was that he had humanized Donald Trump. So they don't want us to be humanized, and they are segregating us, and we're self-segregating. That does not bode well for the next step.
When I watched that movie Jojo Rabbit, I saw that behavior, Evan. You see like the dehumanization of the Jews in that story, and everybody takes it from this, this is the left's view of the world in a positive way, but I saw the same thing happening where they're dehumanizing people. And, it's impossible for me as a white guy to be anything except for what I'm assigned. I'm not even allowed to be evolved or anything else. We have like 5 minutes left. What can we do? Why do Yasha Monk did some great work in the political science side, saying that the youth is much more tolerant of totalitarian leadership. What on earth do we do about this, fellas? How do we maintain individual liberty?
I think you have to stop being silent. Everybody's got to speak out when you're at work or when you observe somebody being canceled out or being bullied, and you're going to have to stand up and say, not just stop that, but you should be ashamed of yourself. And if you keep doing it, this is what I'm going to do back, and fight back. I know that at Stanford, where I work, I've had a couple things happen to me like that. And when I fought back, not only did they back off, but they ended up apologizing. And when I fought back for other people, it's the same thing. So you can see it, the most earthy manifestation of these Antifa people with these whiny nasal voices and skinny little arms, and they're out there on the street as if they're Napoleonic soldiers. And then suddenly the police get enough of it and they push them or they arrest them and they go into a fetal position and they start whining like they're stuck pigs.
Crying.
They're cowards. and they're cowards. Even the BLM people look at them and say, my God, I don't even want these allies. They're just wimps. So I think if everybody just stood up, we know that was true of the Jacobins and the Bolsheviks. The Bolsheviks succeeded because nobody stood up. The liberals went along with them, and the Jacobins failed because people said, you know what, you're not going to get away with this. And then they ended up getting their own medicine. So I think we have to stand up, everybody according to their station.
Listen, I wholeheartedly agree with that. But I think there has to be two things in everybody's mind on our side of things, or on our side of things being lowercase l liberal. You have to agree with my policies on abortion or on taxation or whatever. One, people need to recognize this is, in fact, war. It may be war by another means, but every war has been war by another means. Marx and Lenin sought to bring socialism to the world via revolution, Hitler via invasion, the Soviets via proxy and attrition. And the fact that this is being done in a way that looks different than other wars does not make it anything less than war. I think there are a lot of people on our side who going back to what Victor said earlier, who just don't really see that this is anything more than, okay, we're going to get a little bit of Bill Clinton now, and then it'll come back, and then this is a revolutionary war. And once you recognize that sacrifices are made at times of war, you're going to have to sacrifice. And some of the things you're going to have to sacrifice, perhaps, is a job. You have to but you have to stand up and speak your mind. It might be family relations, but you have to stand up and speak your mind. Evil always has an advantage over good when they're at war, because good is constrained by its goodness. And Saul Alinsky, who wrote a de facto war manual for this culture war, Rules for Radicals, made one of his rules, make the other side live up to their book of rules. Well, we might have to violate some of the rules that we have lived by, the rules of civility and whatnot. We might have to push ourselves to things they wouldn't have done if the other side were the loyal opposition and not the resistance.
I agree. And I think it's the 11th hour, and I expect that we'll see in November what the answer is. November is very important to see whether this is a replay of 2016, as I think and hope it is, or people are so demoralized and scared, and they've been so influenced by these institutions that they either don't participate or they just say, get in a fetal position, make it all go away. I got to vote for this.
And may I just add to that, whatever happens in November, in my view, as I see it, it's nothing more than the landing at Normandy. Yeah. If we succeed, there's still bloody, metaphorically bloody, I hope, but bloody and hand to hand and fights to be fought, battles to be won. If we don't land at Normandy, if that doesn't work out.
Hey, this is Pete A. Turner from Lions Rock Productions. We create podcasts around here, and if you, your brand, or your company want to figure out how to do a podcast, just talk to me. I'll give you the advice on the right gear, the best plan, and show you how to take a podcast that makes sense for you, that's sustainable, that's scalable, and fun. Hit me up at pete@breakitdownshow.com. Let me help. I want to hear about it.
Fights to be fought, battles to be won. If we don't land at Normandy, if that doesn't work out, I fear for our future.
One real quick question before we wrap up here. Will, in the next 20 years, will the United States map look like it does today, the Puerto Rico DC thing aside, or will it have broken apart? What do you guys think? Will we go our own separate ways?
I think the map will look the same, but it's already breaking apart. So it'll look like European states did, say, in the 1920s or 30s, before the borders changed. And I think the borders won't change because it's very hard to do that. But we're already living in two Californias. Where I live out here in the Central Valley has nothing. When I go to Stanford, I have nothing in common. The speech patterns, the dress, the fashion, the values, the daily lifestyles of people, they're so antithetical to what rural Fresno County or the Sierra Nevada or the foothill people are. So we're creating two different cultures, partly because of globalization, partly the red-blue political divide, partly because the left doesn't want to compromise and it wants to force people, to take a knee, metaphorically and physically. So I think it'll look like the United States, but it will be two Americas. It already is getting that way.
The problem, yeah, the problem is let's call this the Second Civil War. The first Civil War, you had actual delineation. You had the North and the South that just doesn't exist any longer. I mean, it's no longer the North and the South. It's no longer even red states and blue states. It's really almost exclusively cities and everything else. And so unless the states are going to purge themselves of their cities, I just don't see how secession in any way, shape, or form can work. It's simply the battle lines are not drawn that way.
Yeah, especially when cities, the virus taught a lot of people in cities they don't feel safe on mass transit, apartments, elevator living, and then the lockdown showed that it would be selectively enforced and politically biased. And then the recession and the rioting told people in the cities, the more money you pay in taxes, the worse your services are, and we won't protect you, and we shouldn't protect you because your property is part of your privilege and it was ill-gotten. And I think people are leaving the cities in droves for that reason. I'm not sure.
And that bodes well for our side, and because it's exactly the opposite of what they had been intending to do, which was to move everybody into the cities.
Yeah, and telemarketing and Skype and what we're doing now allows you not to have to go into a city in the first place to work.
Well, listen, I had Victor for a half an hour, and he gave it to us. Thank you again so much for coming on. You guys definitely should buy Victor's World War II history. It's fantastic. What book is next for you? I know you're always working on something.
I got a book called The Dying Citizen, and it's about how the citizenship is being destroyed both on the pre-modern and the postmodern side. And so Americans are becoming residents or peasants or tribes or globalists, or they're subject to the administrative state without recourse. But it's a destruction in what used to be classical citizenship.
Evan, if you want to hang out and chat, we can chat for a few if you've got time.
Sure, a few, but I don't want to make it look like I'm not as busy as Victor. I mean, this whole thing was to make it appear like we're sort of, peers, he and I, and now suddenly it's just the two kids, and then the grown-up's gone.
But here's a question I didn't get the chance to ask, and I want to ask you this question. When it comes to the education part, right, people will say things that are just factually wrong. There's fact checkers right now looking at the stupid debates from last night, and we've already proven that fact checking doesn't fucking work because facts are.
By the way, I noticed she didn't curse. I know she didn't curse when Victor was here.
Well, I'm not mad at you or Victor. I'm mad at the fact checkers when they put something out and you're like, come on. So like for example, I think we talked about this when we had you, Eric, and I on about a week and a half ago. How come people don't get that Utopia, written by Thomas More, is a piece of satire? And why do they? And it's like they don't educate themselves. Because
education is unnecessary. Facts are unnecessary in a world that is so close to paradise that it doesn't matter if you're right or wrong. See, it used to matter if you were right or wrong because if you were wrong, you didn't eat. Now, everybody eats. Everybody eats so well that today 1 million people are going to say no to food because it's not vegan or whole.
Yeah.
It used to have to be right because being wrong came with consequences. If you bought the wrong product, if you did the wrong, you got sick. Today, what diseases are there? Smallpox vanquished, chickenpox vanquished, polio vanquished, and even
AIDS vanquished.
Right, AIDS vanquished. So there's no need to be right. And in the world where there's no need to be right, where everything is equally right, the outcome, you're going to go to college no matter what, all right, if you choose to. There's nobody who can't go to college these days. So you don't have to be right. You don't have to be smart. And in a world where right and wrong has no consequences, then indiscriminateness, anything goes, is the right answer.
Yeah. The other thing is we have a very fortunate balance of freedoms, and this concept just does not work for a lot of people. Yet it remains to be, get this, a fact. We have 3 documents that protect the 3 distinct properties of our freedom. So there's the Declaration of Independence, which protects our national freedom. We have the Bill of Rights, which protects our personal freedom. And then we have the Constitution, which protects our political freedom. If you say that to somebody, and I won't just say on the left, but in general, it breaks their brain. Like they'll say, I wasn't free on 1776. No, you're right. This is a national freedom. We had to get national freedom first before we can have, it's like they think that there's one document and it happened on 1776 or something. Like, that's not how
and it was written for specific individuals, the elite. It was written by white people for white privilege so that white people could succeed. And in reality, it's a document that even if it wasn't perfectly lived up to, for a variety of reasons, by the way, because 1776 is different in realities, in every possible reality. The fastest a human being could go back then was as fast as the fastest horse.
Yeah.
All right.
For as long as that horse could run. That's a temporary time.
Now, you press a button. If you wanted to send a letter to somebody, you gave it to a guy on horseback. Now you hit send, and it goes around the globe. The whole world has gotten smaller, and things that we couldn't control because we were such a large land mass with such ridiculously primitive technology. I mean, up until the railroad, from the dawn of time until just the other day, basically, technology was all basically the same. Right? Then suddenly everything went on this trajectory, and there's a great line. He wrote it about a previous generation, but so maybe it's just true of all generations. But about this one, it's so singularly true. It says, heirs to all the ages, they remain blissfully ignorant of the debt they owe. They think that they've been born into this world of such utter perfection, such utter near perfection, if that's not oxymoronic. They think that that's their birthright, and anything short of perfection is because of the failures of those who came before, as opposed to seeing that the only reason we're this close to perfection is because of the successes of the people who came before.
We can't get through, during a massive pandemic, we can't get legislation through the House to provide relief to people that are desperate for it. Whether that's right or wrong, forget about that. We can't solve that problem. How on earth were people 200 plus years ago going to solve slavery at the beginning of a nation that was barely held together? Like, it's, again, we have to know our own history and how unlikely
that's specifically why they don't want us to know our own history.
Yeah.
This is specifically why they don't teach history, and they've replaced history with ethnic and identity grievance classes. They've eliminated the whole and made it the one.
I want to say this, and I want to say it out loud just because it's got to be on the record. I love people. I hate violence. I want everybody to get along. I want to inch closer all the time towards a better, more perfect union. But I keep hearing about civil war and everything else. And I promise I'm better at war than pretty much anybody that's going to stand in front of me.
Well, that's why I'm sucking up to you like this.
I know how to warlord. I learned from warlords.
I wouldn't be on some obscure podcast if I didn't think you were going to save my ass.
Yeah. What I don't want this to happen is to break down into violence, because what you think you will get out of the violence is not utopia.
I know who's going to, I have a way of saying this. So I know who's going to be victorious, but I also know that nobody's going to win. All right. The life that we have right now is not going to be made better by violence. But if that's what it takes to prevent the world they're seeking to create, then we need to win that war. We need to fight it. We need to prevent the evils that they will bring to this world. Not necessarily because the evil is what I call in the book their original purpose. Their original purpose, what they're using this violence to achieve, is not violence itself. Hitler didn't imagine a world of gas chambers and ovens. He imagined the perfect world of his imagination after the gas chambers and ovens. Mao didn't imagine a world with millions of dead bodies littering the killing fields. He imagined the perfect world of his imagination after the killing fields had accomplished their job. Stalin and Lenin, they didn't imagine a world of permanent exile and imprisonment and gulags and mental institutions. He imagined the workers' paradise after those things had accomplished their goals. And by the way, all three of those that I just mentioned, Mao's China, Stalin and Lenin's Russia, and Hitler's Germany, were socialists, were globalists, and they were utopianists, and they were all cancel cultures. The fact that today's cancel culture uses a more sophisticated technological means than the previous ones, that's only because they didn't have the advanced technological means to cancel the other the way that they do today. And this is exactly what Orwell's genius was. And Orwell's genius in 1984 wasn't recognizing the inherent authoritarianism and totalitarianism of socialism. Everybody was aware of that. Right? Even Marx even wrote it into the theory, right? Even before humans get involved. The perfect theory of socialism required first a dictatorship of the proletariat to violently cancel all of the others. Well, that's the stage right now. That's the riots we're seeing. This is not the utopia they envision. This is just the dictatorship of the proletariat that they need to destroy the world as it is, to cancel all the others in order to get to the utopia that John Lennon sang about in the song Imagine.
Yeah. It turns out those things aren't easy to accomplish. And again, because I've been to other places, we're so fortunate to live here. You can wad up whatever you're done using. You don't have to use all of it, and throw it in whichever trash can it should go into, and it disappears. Once a week, someone comes by and takes your waste away from you, and you never worry about it again.
You flush a toilet. I mean, even kings and czars and popes of yore, and still billions of people around the globe today, you used to have a little chamber pot.
Yeah.
And then, and we're not even talking, Victor Davis Hanson, Peloponnesian War times. We're talking 100 years ago.
We're talking many countries. I've been to countries where they put their poop into a tube in their house and they slowly shove it until by the time it gets outside of the house, it's no longer really harmful poop. It's dried out waste. We also put our waste, our human waste, into potable water. That is like the epitome of decadence. Like, or we turn water on and we let it pour. I think about that every time.
I have a friend named Adam Yenser. He's just an absolutely great stand-up comedian and a writer for television who I use as often as I can as my opening act when I do stand-up comedy. He's just got this brilliant bit about that, how he was at the Universal theme park where they have this giant fountain out front. And he saw some tourists from Africa who were looking at the fountain, saying, what could they possibly be thinking? We have so much water in America that after we're done bathing and washing and cooking and using it for everything we could possibly use, we use it to decorate. And then we have so much money that after we bought everything we could possibly buy, we take that money and we throw it in the water and we wish for a better life. That's my friend Adam Yenser.
Another thing that we do is we use all that water. We live in the desert where you're not supposed to live, not near a river or anything else. And we say, don't you dare make me process this water and drink it again. Even though we have the technology to do that, don't you dare make me drink reclaimed water. And I will have a lawn here in the desert, no matter what. It's like, so if we want to solve these social problems, let's go to a place that sucks. I'm all for reducing suffering. We're not suffering that much.
I go to Canada sometimes.
Yeah, there you go. We couldn't get Haiti to reboot and go in a direction that made sense. All we created with all that money was corruption because we are the ultimate corrupter. That's the thing we export. We export some security and some fear of consequences, but we also export a whole lot of corruption where we get mad at ourselves if we say, hey, we're going to turn that aid off, It blows me away.
I had this happen with my cousin, Larry, who is the foil that I use in my stand-up show for my typical leftist, my typical good-hearted, well-educated or long-educated, who stood up at Passover one year, stood on the chair and said, we have to do more to help the Sudanese. But what? We've sent them so much money.
Yeah.
And all that happens is the warlords steal it, and the people doing the bad things become more powerful. The people who are needy remain just as needy. And all we've done is, as you say, I wouldn't quite put it the way you put it, but we've further empowered corruption.
Yeah. All of my my State Department people that I ever worked with, and God bless, I mean, they're all trying hard. They'll say, like, that's corruption. And it's the standard thing where, like, you're pointing at somebody, but where like your fingers are pointing back at you. We are the corrupter. We bring money to something with no design beyond that. We come to change. And this is the same. This is the problem with these programs. It's like we would come to Afghanistan and say, hey, we're going to create a stable state. We're going to give your police state of the art. Like what Bush laid out makes a lot of sense. He can go into your Mao example. You know, he really laid out this wonderful multinational approach. The Germans are going to work on policing. You know, we're going to work on agriculture.
Because everybody does what they're good at.
Yeah. By the way, in the 90s, I watched a cop, an American, we got pulled over, and an American got a tiny bit lippy because in America you can do that. And what he caught on that lip was a baton an instant later. And instant compliance. I've seen that face to with my face.
You know what? I'll bite my lip if they'll hit some people. I'm okay with that. All right, listen, I got to start to get ready to go, but this is a perfect time to sell my book.
Okay, let's sell that book. Get the Woke Supremacy on Amazon. There's our link. Get it because also next week we're going to have Will Riley. He's going to talk about deprogramming wokeism. So here's your guide to go with that particular course. And I think you guys get what Evan's talking about, a better place through just, a sensible policy and getting rid of the hate.
Very quickly. One of the biggest differences between the left and the right is that the political right seeks to ameliorate things. They seek to make things better, less poverty, fewer homeless. The left promises paradise if only you give them all the power, all the money, and do what they say. And we've never, even if you look at those, they're upset because we say America is exceptional. We don't say America's perfect, right? We say make America great again. We don't say that America was ever perfect. Even the founding fathers said, in order to make a more perfect union, which means by definition, they recognized it wasn't perfect. It's the left that promises the workers paradise. It's the left that promises utopia. And because utopia is, why don't you tell us what utopia is, Pete?
Well, it's a satirical piece from Thomas More. Utopia is actually utopia because we're bad at Greek, and that means no place. And the guy who tells the tale, his name means the purveyor of nonsense. That's the facts. You can fact check that all you want.
Which, by the way, is the same thing that Biden means. It was just shortened for showbiz purposes.
I thought it meant criminal, but
There you go. All right, buy the woke supremacy. That's it.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for checking out Victor and Evan. It was awesome. I'm going to shut up now, and you guys all have a great day. Stand by 1 sec, Victor.